you don't go into those games complacent. You're fully aware that if you do lose, you're going to be remembered forever.
As much as Kai Havertz couldn't finish his dinner, that was a brilliant save for a 6'6" goalkeeper, because they look a team to me, Terry, who have lost their imagination. They're playing with no imagination.
Havertz is going to miss his penalty. Much better bloke and a much better player than that. The worst dive I've ever seen by a top level footballer.
It's too simplistic to say they're badly missing Bukayo Saka, but that is true.
They need serious investment in their front unit. If you're an ambitious club that wants to win the Premier League, you've got to think about 2 windows ahead, or you've got to think about what could happen in the next 12 months. Think about that just for a second. 18 years of age. These are the players that have been leading Spurs over the last couple of weeks.
It's incredible what they've done. I mean, they've won 7 straight games.
He's going to be working with one hand tied behind his back unless they can deliver him a centre forward, the West Ham board.
Relegation battle, maybe.
I always find baffling, the clubs are willing to spend huge amounts of money on players, but they never want to pay for a manager, do they?
Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and Spanish football expert, European football expert, and all-round legend, the former Wimbledon, Coventry, Tottenham forward, and Manchester United forward. It's Terry Gibson. Whoa, the FA Cup. Well, do you know what? I thought Thursday, Friday, Saturday was okay. Friday night, quite good. We saw a few sort of incidents happen in the Aston Villa-West Ham game, and we had Oliver Scholes making his first start, and I thought he did really, really well. So he gets a bit of a round of applause. But it's all about Sunday, right? The FA Cup was all about Sunday. Arsenal-Manchester United, very good game in terms of entertainment value. Lots of missed chances, bit of cheating going on. No VAR to get involved as well, so that was all quite fun. A bit of a spat on the touchline. We like all that, especially in the FA Cup. And then Tottenham going to Tamworth and making a pig's ear of it, or a lamb's ear of it, whatever you want to say, Terry. It was, you know what? I got to say, Tamworth, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Terry, could you make some excuses, please? Because off air, you've been doing that already.
I've got a whole list of them ready, Sam. Dodgy pitch,
good.
long throw-in.
Right. Yeah.
It's a bit frosty, a bit chilly.
Cold changing rooms, yeah.
Small changing rooms.
Hostile fan base.
I'm just thankful that apart from the Tamworth fans are going to remember this game after, Tuesday, Wednesday? Because if you do lose, we're talking about it in 30 years' time.
Oh, mate, that was
I'm still
literally,
around.
they were seconds away from the biggest FA Cup upset of all time. Like when Cullinane Liebert hits that, toe pokes that ball forward. If he gets any sort of decent connection on it, it's over. I mean, Tottenham's reputation of throwing away games like that was coming back to haunt them for the rest of, probably for 50 years. There was no escaping it.
Exactly, and I think that does bring a pressure to the players as well, because you don't go into those games complacent. You're fully aware that if you do lose, you're going to be remembered forever. And in Spurs' case, it was an apprehensive performance. I mean, first half was awful. I mean, it looked like it was a competitive game, wasn't it? Second half wasn't much better, but then the substitutes came on. I do feel for Ange and the Spurs players in the fact that the last place you would want to go, even against lower league opposition, is on an AstroTurf pitch in January.
Just explain to me what the problem is here, because when I was watching them pass the ball around, I thought at times in the first half, they were quite enjoying it, pumping it around. It wasn't causing them too many problems. And then the boys in the studio at half-time said, it's slowing up just before it gets to them, and, it's a bit more difficult. I mean, why would it be a problem?
I think, in my opinion, and playing on artificial surfaces in my career, twisting and turning was my problem. You can't do it at the normal speed. So that makes you concerned about, when you're taking people on. It makes you concerned when you're trying to close people down and you have to twist and change direction quicker than you would like to do, because you're not able to do that because you're apprehensive about the surface, about how you're turning and stuff like that. So I think that's to me, that was always, because people used to say to me, because I was quick, believe it or not, when I was a couple of stone lighter and 30, 40 years younger.
Hey, weren't we all, Terry?
No, you're not. You're doing all right, Sam. And changing direction was my issue. It was, you were quick off the mark and you could run fast in a straight line. But as soon as you tried to change direction, it was an issue. And admittedly, the surfaces have got better over the years than playing on what was carpet, basically, Loftus Road and Kenilworth Road. But it's still the same thing. The players are not used to it. They do have those surfaces at the training ground, but they're barely used because the managers, the coaches, the fitness people, they don't want players playing on that too often. So there's always that worry of an injury or two. So I think Spurs came through unscathed. It took them longer than it should have done. But when they brought on some of the big hitters at the end, there was a huge difference. And fitness tells at the end. That was the main difference.
That was the main thing. I mean, the fact is they took them to 90 minutes and could have won it. And if actually it had been this time last year, we'd have been talking about a replay at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But trying to ask part-time players to play 120 minutes, it's impossible for them. So I suppose that there will be a call for, why haven't we got replays this year? There will be all that again because they've missed out. They've missed out on what would have been another money-spinning time. That definitely would have been on the television. We would have been going there next week. There's just no room in the calendar, I'm afraid.
And they dealt with the throw, the long throw. That's a freaky. It's a freaky throw, isn't it? Tom Tonks. It was. I was looking forward to seeing it. Thinking, but the big issue nowadays is you can't go near the goalkeepers.
I spoke to him last night, actually. Andy Peaks, the manager of Tamworth, when I was driving home. And he said, look, I'm really proud of the boys, whatever, but I'm so disappointed. But when I sit back and reflect on it in, a week, 2 weeks' time, I'll realise that we were this close, just this close to creating the biggest FA Cup upset of all time. So, look, congratulations to Tamworth. I thought they did brilliantly. Arsenal won, Manchester United won. United had 61 minutes to play with 10 men because of the extra time. They could have had a replay as well. But as predicted by Crook on Friday, it would finish 1-1 and it went to penalties. I mean, Nostradamus. What are the lottery numbers?
Well, I just felt like Arsenal and their current guys wouldn't be able to outscore Manchester United. And so it proved. Had enough chances in that hour with 10 men to win the game, certainly in normal time and extra time as well. But credit to Ruben Amorim and credit to these United players. They've shown a lot more character, a lot more spirit, a lot more tactical nous and game management in these last two games, probably than they have for the rest of the season combined. So you spoke about it after Liverpool and in the build-up to this game. Again, having that full week on the training ground, I think has paid dividends. I think we're starting to see now that this squad can play the way that Amorim wants them to. There were some real heroes out there, not least Binder, the goalkeeper, who I was a bit sceptical about, and particularly after he conceded the first goal. But, I mean, the save he made in the shootout, as much as Kai Havertz couldn't finish his dinner, that was a brilliant save for a 6'6" goalkeeper to get himself down to that bottom left-hand corner and claw the ball away was brilliant. I thought Harry Maguire, who missed a lot of training this week by all accounts, was absolutely exceptional. And Joshua Zirkzee, again, has been one of my battering rams this season, not for good reason. I was convinced he'd missing the shootout. So for him to step up and score the winning penalty and been jeered off only a couple of weeks ago at Old Trafford, I think was a really nice story. So all in all, really positive from United's perspective. But if you're Arsenal and Mikel Arteta, I think they should be worried because they look a team to me, Terry, who have lost their imagination. They're playing with no imagination. They're so caught up in the moment when they get one of those set pieces. They focus so much energy on making sure they're where they should be and trying to score from there. They seem to have forgotten how to score from open play.
Totally agree. And they've become a fundamental team, Arsenal, without realising it. And the amount of times they put a cross into the box when you think you could have been a little bit more patient there and got into a better crossing position. But Odegaard must have put 20 crosses into the box from exactly the same position where he cuts back on his left foot, whips it towards the far post. They just weren't getting on the end of them. And everyone looked dangerous. But when you keep repeating that, there were options there for other options for Odegaard instead of doing the same thing over and over again. Perhaps without a target man in the penalty box, your traditional centre forward, to get on the end of things. It was up to midfield players to run and get to the far post. But I agree with you. It's the set pieces. They haven't become an issue because they're always going to be more than handy to have. But they are relying on it. The whole stadium comes alive when they get a corner now. And yet teams in the last few weeks seem to have sussed out that formation where they put everything towards the far post, 3 or 4 players combining, making different runs. Teams have sussed it out. Manchester United were the ones that were the worst about a month ago when they had no idea what they were doing against Arsenal with those set pieces. But yes, they looked quite comfortable. So Yeah, Havertz missed 2 or 3 sitters. Did anybody fancy him to score in the penalty shootout? I didn't.
I text Crook actually just before the penalty shootout started and said to him, Kai Havertz is going to miss his penalty because it was obvious, wasn't it? And also, I said, I've got nothing against Kai Havertz, despite the fact he scored the winning goal in the Champions League for my team and then told everybody that it would mean more if he won something with Arsenal. However, I did think that, he didn't do himself any favours yesterday by diving. I mean, that was the worst dive I've ever seen by a top level footballer that has resulted in a penalty. Because, it's obviously a dive. Harry Maguire is hardly anywhere near him, honestly. I actually think that is cheating.
Yeah, and I think he made the most of the Dalot challenge as well. Was it Havertz who got caught for the second yellow card? I'm not excusing Dalot, by the way, because I think that was rank stupidity.
No, silly.
Having over touched with the first touch. Just pull out the tackle. You don't need to make that challenge there. You've just been booked. But I do think the referee, Andy Madley, had an absolute shocker. We've spoken a lot about VAR and the lack of it in the FA Cup this weekend. I think his performance was a brilliant advert for VAR because there's no way that penalty would have been given.
Oh, it's ridiculous. That penalty is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm pleased it was saved, but actually, that doesn't excuse the bad decision, and it doesn't excuse Kai Havertz because the thing about that is that he doesn't need to do that. Kai Havertz is a much better bloke and a much better player than that. That's properly cheating. And I'm pleased that Harry Maguire was pictured giving him some serious stick because I think he felt like everybody else watching it. If you're going to win a game properly. Don't do it like that. Other standout moments from the FA Cup this weekend. I missed out by 1 goal as I predicted Chelsea 6, Morecambe 0. And they blew the whistle on 90 minutes, right, to put Morecambe out of their misery. And I was like, hold on a second. Some of us have got some skin in the game here still, right? What are you doing?
That was a bold prediction, that wasn't it? The Premier League billionaires slap up the team 91st in the Football League.
Oh, outrageous! I was 1 goal away. I was well annoyed about that. And Bromley, what a moment that was when they took the lead against Newcastle United, and by the way, could have scored a second goal very soon afterwards as well. Terrific for them. And if you've seen the social media videos from the away end up high in the Lees' end. Terrific. Limbs everywhere. Absolutely brilliant. Congratulations to the Ravens. Bromley getting a go up at Newcastle. It's been some journey under Andy Woodman.
We should mention the Devon duo, shouldn't we, as well, for saving Saturday in the FA Cup. Plymouth winning at Brentford and Exeter City knocking out Oxford from the Championship. And both got good draws, haven't they? Plymouth at home to Liverpool and Exeter at home to Forest, which my Exeter supporting pal, who's never seen them get into the fourth round in his lifetime, is very excited about.
Well, there you go. Exciting. I was down at St James Park actually for a Liverpool game a few seasons ago, and they did really well there. It was 2-2 and took them back to Anfield for a replay. Terrific. We'll see what happens in the fourth round. Aston Villa against Tottenham, I think, is a standout tie as well. And Manchester United have got Leicester, the Ruud van Nistelrooy derby, which will be quite fun as well. Let's move on to the midweek Premier League action now because there's a full programme in the top flight. Well, this is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because Mikel Arteta is entertaining Ange Postecoglou this week. And both these two managers, Terry, are in a bit of a sticky patch, aren't they? I mean, Ange Postecoglou will claim, hold on, we just got through to a League Cup semi-final. Yeah, but you've also just been held by Tamworth. Yes.
Kept clean sheet, though.
Nothing if not reliably inconsistent, Tottenham. And Arsenal are like, we can only score if it's a set piece. We've sort of got ourselves into a bit of a cul-de-sac here. So what happens when the two meet at the Emirates Stadium?
I still think Arsenal will win. But having said that, Tottenham do tend to score goals, just not away from home at non-league opposition, it seems. So, again, if it becomes a shootout, have Arsenal got the firepower? I mean, it's too simplistic to say they're badly missing Bukayo Saka, but that is true. And Gabriel Jesus' injury is a real problem. That doesn't look like one that he's going to come back from quickly. Kai Havertz, I think, is a confidence player, and his confidence would have been dented by the 2 penalty misses at the weekend. So I think this is probably a more difficult fixture for Arsenal now on the back of the week they've had than maybe if we were recording this podcast this time last week we'd have thought.
I'm coming off the Bukayo Saka, it's all down to him thing now. Because it was all down to Martin Ødegaard when he was out. Now it's all down to Bukayo Saka that he's out. So I'm going to say that I think there's a slightly different issue here with Arsenal. I think that there is a lack of invention throughout the team. They've spent too much money, I think, over the course of the last 5 years on defensive players and not enough on offensive players. There's not enough variation in their attack. And whether you're relying on Saka or Erdegaard or whatever, you can't just have two players that are creative in your team. And you'd expect more from Havertz to create chances as well as score chances. Trossard was scoring goals for fun at the end of last season and the season before when he came in from Brighton. So Martinelli hasn't kicked on from where he was. He's only 23, but he's having a bit of a tough time. And I think that if we're honest, Terry, that I think it's a mindset problem with Arsenal. They seem to have hit a bit of a roadblock, and I don't know whether that's down to Mikel Arteta being far too intense or whether it's to do with the fact that actually they're just really tired because they've done 2.5 years of working at this unbelievable level, and they, a bit like Manchester City, have just hit a bit of a brick wall. But they look to me like a team that need investment. They need serious investment in their front unit. And unless that happens, they're going to actually limp towards the end of the season rather than charge towards any sort of title challenge.
Yeah, and I think Gabriel Jesus, his recent form papered over the cracks a little bit, to be honest, recently.
And
because
now he's injured.
Yeah, that came as a surprise. Suddenly hit this rich vein of form in front of goal, and everybody was saying, yeah, we always knew he was a decent player. He just needed to add goals on a regular basis. And he was doing that. Now he's injured as well. So that means that probably Kai Havertz has to start again up front. I mean, when you saw him taking the penalty in the shootout yesterday, you saw a player that looked haunted. You know, he was thinking, I've already missed one. I've got to take it against the same goalkeeper again. The pressure's on.
Nasty, Terry, because he just looks like that. That's just the way he is.
No, and I wondered whether it was the right decision to actually give him one of the first 5 penalties. You know, because of what he just missed one. He'd missed 2 or 3 sitters. He's probably the last person you wanted to take one, but somehow he was in the first 5 options. I wouldn't have had him take one, to be honest, until he had to. But it's you know, that's how Arsenal are at the moment. I think they're a strong, powerful unit as well. They've stiffened up the defence over the years. Perhaps the last piece of the jigsaw is up front. Are they going to be able to do that in January? I doubt it, because anyone that's got a top-class centre-forward don't want to sell them. Everyone is chasing a centre-forward in every transfer market.
But I'm not excusing it, because you knew this last summer. You knew this last January. You knew this the summer before. You've got to... If you're an ambitious club that wants to win the Premier League, you've got to think about 2 windows ahead, or you've got to think about what could happen in the next 12 months. You can't just plan for the next midweek game against Tottenham. You've got to plan longer term, and they haven't done that with the forward positions. They've looked at what they've got and thought, we're satisfied with this, and we've got enough coming through the academy. And look, let's not pretend they haven't got injuries. They've got Saka, Wanyeri, yes. They sold Smith Rowe. They sold Reece Nelson. But the truth is actually, if they'd been a little bit cuter, they probably could have used Smith Rowe and Nelson a little bit more last season, convinced them to stay this season. They would have had a big part to play in this campaign. Yes, you can talk about PSR and them needing to send them and sell them because of that. You might say that those players had enough of being bench warmers. But it's your job as a manager to be able to cultivate a squad that can impact over the course of a whole season, not just the first 6 months. And I think, and I like Mikel Arteta, and I like what Arsenal have done over the last 5 years, I think they probably this time around missed a couple of tricks.
Yes.
The squad's not big enough. They haven't got enough variation in the attack, and that shouldn't be the case if you want to win the championship.
I think they've also invested in the wrong areas. You know, if you look at the money they spent on Mikel Merino and Calafiori, you know, both good players in their own right, would they not have been better off pooling that money and just signing a £65 million forward from somewhere?
Possibly. What about Tottenham Hotspur? You never know what you're going to get with them, Terry, do you? I mean, they can beat Liverpool and then draw 0-0 for the first time in 83 games with Tamworth. I mean, if anyone was going to hold them to a 0-0, it wasn't going to be Tamworth of the 5th tier, 96 places below them. Was it? Oh, yeah, of course it is. It's Tottenham. That's just the way it works. So what happens with them this week?
Well, I think we're going to see the same group of players. No one's coming back from the injury list. So what I've seen, though, and the Tamworth game, obviously, but I think the Liverpool game last week in the Carabao Cup semi-final first leg was they were a little bit more pragmatic in their approach, which
absolutely
people have been calling out for, because you have this makeshift back four, which it is. Then you can't defend in the same way you do when you got Mickey van der Ven and Romero Hart defence and a regular goalkeeper playing behind them. So I think they weren't as gung ho in terms of chasing up to the halfway line as they were when they conceded 6 against Liverpool. So hopefully that was a lesson learned. And I think if they approach the Arsenal game in the same way, they do have I think the second highest goal scorers in the league.
Yeah.
And but they've conceded 30. So I've always been, for the last couple of months, when are we going to keep a clean sheet? Because it seemed as if that was an afterthought. If you keep clean sheets, I'm not saying every single game, but it gives you a chance. And I think if they go and approach the Arsenal game in the same way, there's no doubt they have the talent going forward. Solanke is playing really well now. He's become a really important player after a slow start, and people had question marks. Bergvall is an absolute sensation.
That's terrific.
He's fantastic. He has to curb the enthusiasm on one or two of his tackles, but we like that. That's you can see that's his personality, his character. He doesn't shirk a challenge. He's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder when he wants to leave his foot in, but we don't want him sent off too often, which he probably should have been last week. So I think the signs are good for Spurs. They're going to it in a confident mood. Yes, they got the win against Tamworth, but it wasn't a great performance, but they went through unscathed. There's no massive drama to be concerned of. But they could do with one or two of the injuries coming back, but it's not going to be the case for the game against Arsenal this midweek.
It's a very, very Spurs-esque polish on the situation. Well done, Terry. Like that. Would you like a job in the Spurs PR department? Yeah, there's one available for you there. I did think they were more robust on Wednesday when they beat Liverpool, and I thought that it was worth mentioning yesterday, actually, when I was talking about Spurs. You've got to factor in that a lot of the players that played in that game and eventually played in this game are very young players. Archie Gray is 18, Bergvall's 18. Think about that just for a second. 18 years of age. These are the players that have been leading Spurs over the last couple of weeks, and they are their best players. Like Bentancur obviously has been injured, so there's a gap in midfield. He's been in and out the team anyway. Bergvall has taken on that position in the middle of the park, and he is terrific. He's very young, very raw. Yes, he is a little bit eager sometimes, but he's an excellent footballer. And I said on yesterday, I think when you go back and look at this period, actually, it's going to have helped Archie Gray. Yeah. It's going to have helped Bergvall. It's going to have helped the younger players that are in that squad to have got through this period without any serious disaster. By the way, they were 1 second away from serious disaster. But to get through this period, it will embolden them a bit, and they will learn a lot from it. I think if you're a Spurs supporter or you're Ange Postecoglou, you're looking at those players and you're thinking, yes, this is great. On the flip side of that, Timo Werner, Son, not playing particularly well at all. I mean, no. Son is not influencing even that game yesterday. The same with Timo Werner, who's having an absolute shocker. And I think if you're playing against Tamworth and you're not getting a couple of goals in your Timo Werner, I'm afraid I think there's an issue with confidence there that you're not going to get over anytime soon.
Well, the manager killed his confidence, didn't he, when he picked him out for special
dressing down.
Dressing down, really. Yeah, I was trying to think of the right word. Son is an interesting one because I know his camp were annoyed that Tottenham only extended the contract by a year as opposed to offering him a brand new deal. But you've got to say on form, and he didn't really make a massive impact when he came on yesterday, he's not doing enough to warrant a long-term deal. And I think you're right. Those two youngsters in particular, Gray and Bergvall, have become two of their most important players, and they're learning on the job, as you say. They're growing in stature. But I think the senior players need to step up. I thought Maddison did that, actually, with the captain's armband. I thought he was one of their better players against Tamworth. But and there's a lot of players there
with all due respect, who seem to have gone backwards. To Tamworth because they did brilliantly. But he's going to get some more space and time on the ball. So if he didn't perform like that, you'd be really critical, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trouble is, what do you do with Timo Werner now? I mean, there was some talk that one or two German clubs were looking to take him back to the Bundesliga. I think Tottenham would pay the airfare, to be honest, because you're right, his confidence is at an all-time low. He just doesn't look like he's going to ever influence a game. And that's a problem, when you've got the injuries that Spurs have. You need people like Timo Werner. And I think actually that's why Postecoglou's come out and said, I'm not going to make the squad lighter. I need all the players I can get. But they have to contribute. And if you can't contribute in those circumstances, you're not going to contribute in a North London derby. Having said that, as we're sat here now, I think they'll get a point, Spurs. I think it'll be another draw for Arsenal.
It'll be interesting to see if Son plays. in the strongest front three, Kulusevski, Johnson, Solanke. I think at the moment, don't think too many Spurs players, supporters would argue about that. That's the best three, and Son coming off the bench.
What about the midfield? Does Maddison get into it?
No, not at the moment. No, I think the former Bergvall has taken over that, and Bergvall does a bit of everything. He's not just the number 10 that Maddison plays. He does everything in midfield. He's box to box, puts his foot in, he gets forward, he creates, he defends. So I don't think Maddison starts in that at the moment.
So if you've got Bissouma, Bergvall and Papsar, you've got a much stronger base, I think, from which to build from. And actually, Papsar can play those raking balls forward. He sometimes releases the ball really quickly and directly and gets people onto the front foot. They've got speed with Johnson on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is a bit tricky, isn't it? Because I think they want Mikey Moore to come up and say, yeah, I'm ready again now. But he's had that virus and he's been out for a long while and he wasn't quite at it yesterday. But the minutes will help him going forward. He's a very good player and he will be, but he's 17. But Son, not quite up to where he should be. Werner, not quite up to where he should be. You want to use Kulusevski, so maybe you use him in a more sort of left-sided role and ask him to come in off that flank. It's not exactly his best position, but maybe that's the way forward. A quick word on the goalkeeper, Antonin Kinski, who yet to concede a goal in a Spurs shirt. He's the only Spurs goalkeeper ever to have 2 clean sheets in a row in the history of Tottenham, I'm sure.
I was waiting for a true stat then.
He looks good,
Jennings and Ray Clements might have a bit to say about that. I'm sure they.
Yeah, maybe. But it was worth it for the fun moment. He's terrific, by the way. Yeah, you're right, Crook. He looks confident. He's good. I like him.
And only 21 against another young one.
I know. Brilliant. And he's a good talker as well. I spoke to him after the Liverpool game. Liverpool themselves go to Nottingham Forest. Ooh, interesting. We should point out before we move on to that, Arsenal, they have failed to win the last 2 home games after a good home run. They failed to win their last 2. They lost against Newcastle. They've lost against Manchester United. These things sometimes happen in threes. Newcastle later on in the week, but Nottingham Forest Liverpool could arguably be one of the toughest games of the season for Liverpool away from home, Crook.
Well, yeah, bearing in mind Forest have already gone to Anfield and won. They had a very defined game plan, and they soaked up pressure, used the pace they have with Hudson-Odoi and Elanga to hit on the counter-attack, and probably in the end were good value for their victory. I think this is difficult for Liverpool. You can't really read too much into the way they dispatch Accrington Stanley, because I think that was always going to happen. I think he went probably with a stronger team than maybe many expected, but obviously Mo Salah was wrapped up in cotton wool for this game. But this is one of a trio of successive away games, which I think are going to test Liverpool's credentials. They go to Brentford and they go to Bournemouth. Obviously, Bournemouth losing both their frontline strikers is not ideal, but you look at how well that these 3 teams have fared this season. This is a tricky run of games for Liverpool at a time when maybe they're not playing at their fluid best. I thought they were very flat against Spurs last week. So if they can win this game, I think that's a big test pass for Arne Slot's side, but it's not going to be easy because Forest are not going away. We're halfway through the season. You keep expecting them to fall off a cliff. I make comparisons to that Leicester team in 2015. Well, they can't last the course. That they're gonna have a blip. At the moment, Forest are showing no sign of it.
Well, halfway through the season, they're doing terrific, haven't they? And the attitude is great. And actually, I spoke to Nuno last Monday night, and I said to him, "When do we start talking about you as title contenders?" And he said to me, "Well, I hope you don't stop until May." And I thought, all right, fair enough. Terry, on Liverpool, the concern I would have is that if they played against Accrington and won quite, I wouldn't say easily, because that's not true, because I was at the game and they had their moments, Accrington. And actually, Liverpool always looked like they could go up an extra gear, and I get that. And they had a strong team out, yes, but it wasn't their first choice team. Darwin Núñez is not performing. I mean, he's suspended this week, and there'll be a few Liverpool fans that will be like, "Oh, at least he's not going to get into the team," because he has been a bit of a problem, I think. And then there's the defence, because I think they've started to concede too many goals. Now, they should have conceded against Accrington at the weekend. Donald Love had an unbelievable chance, which he should have put away. They hit the bar as well with Josh Woods. I just think they've just come off the bridle defensively as well. And Nottingham Forest are so good defensively that if they were to nick a goal here, we could be in the same scenario than what we were at Anfield.
Yeah, I think maybe overconfidence on Liverpool's part. The fact that they're playing so well this season, they've kind of neglected the defensive duties because going forward, we know they're going to score goals. That's a given. And this game would be really interesting because Nottingham Forest won't change the way they play, even though they're at home against Liverpool. They'll sit back, they'll defend deep, they'll look to break on the counter attack. They hope that Chris Wood continues his fine run of form. So Liverpool are going to have the ball. They're going to dominate possession. They're going to be in the attacking half of the pitch, and on a slot, then we'll have to be aware and warn his team that I'm sure he will, who they're playing against, what the opposition want them to do, and make them a little bit more punctual in terms of don't forget your day job, which is you're a fullback, you stay in the right back position or the left back position at times. We don't want to get caught, 2 against 2 or 3 against 2 when the two wide boys and Nottingham Forest push forward on the counter attack. Chris Wood will be upfield. He's the outlet. He's the outball. So I think the tactics from both teams are going to be obvious. But I think Arne Slot does, and he does appear to be the type of manager that doesn't miss those small details that, in terms of we can't concede one because Nottingham Forest, that might be enough for a 1-0 victory. So it's going to be tough to break down, but we have to be diligent in terms of watching on the threat on the counter attack.
They're brilliant at doing that, aren't they? They don't.
It's incredible what they've done. I mean, they've won 7 straight games. This is a team that went into the season, and we're all thinking relegation battle, maybe. That's their first target, avoid any relegation, dogfights. And now they've won 7 on the trot. They've kept 5 clean sheets. Confidence is high. It's amazing how confidence can improve good players into very good players and improve those players into a fantastic team at the moment.
Yeah, I think the setup is right as well, though, isn't it? You've got Murillo, you've got Milinkovic, who are doing very, very well defensively. But in front of those, you've got 2 players in Dominguez, who sort of does a lot of good work, actually, in front of the back four, helps out. And you've got a rotating cast alongside him. Sometimes it's Ryan Yates, sometimes it's one of the other ones that sit in alongside him and just provide that extra level of battle in midfield. And then you've got the goalkeeper, Matt Sells, who I think when he first came in January, we were all like, what is going on here? Every time Nottingham Forest put a goalkeeper in, they have a massive problem. But Nuno Espirito Santo is a goalkeeper, was a goalkeeper. He knows about good goalkeepers, and he obviously spotted something in Sells and thought, right, if I can get his confidence up, he'll be an asset for us. Boy, what an asset. He's played some brilliant saves in the game against Wolves last Monday night, and he'll have to be at his best when they take on Liverpool this week. Let's move on now to 2 games where managers have been swapped out to try and rescue their seasons. 33% of the bottom 9 in the Premier League have switched out their managers this season. The only ones that haven't, Ipswich and Tottenham Hotspur and Crystal Palace. They're the only ones that have kept the same gaffers. Ipswich, you can sort of understand why they wouldn't make a change with Kieran McKenna. Crystal Palace, sort of in that sort of area as they always are. Can you keep us in stasis? Yes, they've got the Austrian Roy Hodgson in charge now, so they're pretty happy with that. But West Ham have pulled the plug now on Julian Lopetegui since we last spoke to you, Terry. And Crook, Graham Potter started, I think, relatively well the first 45 minutes against Aston Villa, but then some of the same old familiar problems came back to haunt them, albeit with a little bit of a helping hand from a poor refereeing decision.
Yeah, it was a shocker. And again, a good advert for VAR because clearly that corner wouldn't have been given.
Not true.
Well, it would have been given, but surely they'd have gone back and looked at it, wouldn't they?
Nope, not allowed to do that. So
really?
VAR would have made no difference to that goal.
Wow.
Tim Robinson would still have made
Well, then the whole
thing's
mistake. Pointless. The whole thing's pointless then. I mean, that was one of the worst decisions that you'll see all season, let alone on FA Cup third round weekend.
The worst thing is that we were miles away, and he'd done 2 in a row, right? So he did the one where it took a deflection and he gave a goal kick when it was a corner, and then there was the one straight afterwards where it didn't take a deflection and it should have been a goal kick, and he gave a corner which led to the goal, which was like, and both of them we'd said at the time when it happened, that's this or that's that. It was obvious, you could see it, and we were right up in the gods on the top gantry. So it was a bit of a surprise, but yeah, VAR can't get involved in that.
Wow. I mean, yeah, absolutely incredible. And you feel for West Ham because it seems I don't know how many ladders that their players have walked under this season, or how many black cats they've crossed. But if they can get a bit of misfortune, they will, not least from that decision. But also Nicholas Füllkrug pulling up with what looked at the time a really nasty hamstring injury. We know that he's going to be out for 3 months now, so that's basically his season done. And he's never really got started, has it, for Füllkrug, which is a shame because I think there's a talented player there. They're going to have to sign a striker in January, but as Terry has already alluded to, that's easier said than done. I know they have already lodged an interest in Evan Ferguson, but he himself is out with an ankle problem that I don't think is going to be that short term, so that could be an issue. Taiwo Awoniyi at Forest is another player on their list, and I wonder if they might make a play for Latte Lat at Middlesbrough, who scored a lot of goals in the Championship this season. I believe is attracting interest from Premier League clubs, but they need someone to lead the line because Jarrod Bowen can do it, but obviously he's injured as well till February, and when you do play him up front, I think you lose something because he's better out wide. Antonio's not going to play again this season, and with the greatest will in the world, Danny Ings, when it comes to top Premier League strikers, his best days are behind him. So I think Graham Potter certainly is going to have to make that his priority. I thought they played well in the first half. I thought they scored a really good goal, almost scored an identical goal, didn't they, a few minutes later, but this time Paquetá got his shot blocked. So there were reasons to be optimistic, but he's going to be working with one hand tied behind his back unless they can deliver him a centre forward, the West Ham board.
The issue there is again, you have not a very little sympathy, but you do think it's a mess of their own making because they had John Duran all sorted and done and decided not to pay the extra amount that was required to get him over the line. And because they didn't do that, he's gone on to have a brilliant season with Aston Villa, and they're without someone to play up front again. And you just think sometimes you just have to commit that money. You have to commit that extra little bit, especially when it comes to a striker, because trying to find one now, Terry, is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, and I think it's always tough when a certain department in a team gets hit by injuries. In case of West Ham, in terms of centre forwards and attacking players, they probably started the season thinking we've got Antonio, we've got Füllkrug, we've got Jarrod Bowen, we've got one or Danny Ings. That's four. They do tend to play under Lopetegui with just the one up front. How many do you think you need? And then when you lose three of them through injury, then it's a problem. So it's something they're going to have to do.
Somerville's got a problem as well, hasn't he?
Yep, he was. I mean, him coming off injured changed the dynamic of West Ham's attack as well. So that's another injury. But their squad's big. I mean, they're attacking wise, midfield players, wide players. There's still players there that we haven't seen the best of. So I think that performance I thought was okay, to be honest, in the first half. I think we've seen similar performances this season from West Ham. Just they've suffered heavy defeats, which have been, and the manner and the style of play that they had under Lopetegui was the main problem. But they've had some brighter moments this season. So let's see if, that was just a new manager bounce. Let's see if they can continue to improve under a new coach, whether there's any difference. It's down to the players ultimately.
Could they do worse than put Kostas Mavropanos up front, just if it does anything else than stop him from slipping over?
No chance. No chance. No chance. If Graham Potter does that, that's it.
Just get him out of the way. I just think get him out of the way because he's causing so many problems at the other end. So, just stick him up. No?
Yeah, but Mavropanos wasn't very good when he was in the Premier League first time round. So what they say the definition of madness is repeating the same errors. I'm not sure why they ever thought they could get a player out of him. Kudus as a false nine potentially for this midweek game. Is that an option?
Yeah.
Yeah, they come up against a Fulham team, by the way, who will surely fancy their chances because they have got a very good squad and they've got a very good manager who's done an excellent job there.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's taken so long for him to get to this stage. And it just goes. It's an example of managers in the past that get an opportunity. It doesn't go well the first time and we don't see them again. But clubs have persisted with giving him opportunities, and now you look at him and I think everyone agrees what a fine job he's doing at Fulham. And if there is one of those bigger jobs that come around than Fulham, then his name is being linked with it now due to the success of not just the results, the style of play. Fulham are a good watch nowadays.
Yeah, he's got a big release clause in his contract, Marco Silva, about £8 million, I think, because he was on West Ham's list of potential Lopetegui successors, but Sullivan felt the release clause was too expensive, which I always find baffling. The clubs are willing to spend huge amounts of money on players, but they never want to pay for a manager, do they?
It's crazy. And the other thing about that is that Dave Sullivan didn't look at the release clause and think that's too expensive at all. Someone told him there was a release clause, and at that moment, Marco Silva immediately became someone that was not going to be considered because he just doesn't do that. He won't pay for them. I do feel a bit bad for Mavropanos now because actually he did really well against England for Greece in the 2 games that he played earlier in the season. So I take it back. Poor lad's just probably suffering with confidence in that back line.
He cost more than 8 million, didn't he?
He probably did. Yes.
Yeah, we could be here with a very long list of players that cost more than 8 million in the last summer's transfer window.
You could have got Marco Silva
I'm
for
not
8
going to
million
get
quid,
personal,
but instead you decided to buy ...
You could have got 10 Marco Silvas for an Anthony. There you go.
Wow. And that's about the number of managers that Manchester United will go through before the end of Anthony's contract. Everton against Aston Villa. Dyche was given his marching orders over on Thursday night, just hours before the Peterborough game. I understand that they decided to move on and that they want a new man in there, and David Moyes has now come in and it's different, whatever. I do think it was a really odd bit of timing, but that was a week ago, so we've probably done that to death now. But what is Moyes going to bring that Dyche didn't? Because, I mean, they're not the same person, but, well, he's pretty close, isn't he?
Yeah, in terms of style, both managers don't really want their team to have possession. They're content to soak up pressure and then try and hit on the counter. But I think he's gonna face the same issues that Dyche did. I do think it was right to make a change. They were 91st out of 92 in the Premier League and EFL for wins in 2024.
That is Crook's stat of the year. He found it out when he did a little bit of research, first time ever, and he has just been spouting it for the last week.
But if you're Sean Dyche, you can't defend that. The fact that only Burton Albion picked up fewer league wins than you did, that is enough to get the sack. And I've seen them on a handful of occasions this year, Everton, and they didn't really try and win the game. They try and defend, they try and keep a clean sheet, but ultimately, that's not going to keep you in the league. If Ipswich continue to improve and spend money in this window, as I think they will, Everton are going to need to find a way to win games. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin's only scored 2 goals all season. I know Beto scored against Peterborough, but I still wasn't overly impressed with his performance. And Jai is okay, but he's not a striker. So unless they find a number 9 who's going to score goals, and again, they're probably part of the conversation for Latte Lat as well, which will be a gamble because he scored goals in the Championship, doesn't always translate to the Premier League. I think this is going to be a slog for David Moyes. They'll be organised, but they were organised under Sean Dyche.
Look, I mean, Wolves are going to Newcastle this week. Everton have got Aston Villa. Ipswich are taking on Brighton. So it's unlikely, but there is a turn of events there, Terry, where Everton end up in the relegation zone by the end of this week.
Yeah, I think the Ipswich form recently, and particularly at home, the win against Chelsea would have given them confidence. And I think there's every possibility they can get something at home to Brighton. So it's a possibility. I agree with Alex, though, that, if you haven't got the players, it's difficult. Sean Dyche's team were keeping clean sheets. They were drawing against teams at the top of the league by 0-0, obviously. So I think it's going to be difficult for David Moyes to have a major impact between now and the end of the season. Maybe I'm trying something different tactically, maybe playing 2 up front. If you're not scoring goals, not being creative in midfield, I think Sean Dyche didn't want to be as direct as Everton possibly should have been, because I think there's an issue with people calling him a dinosaur, an old-fashioned manager. So he tried to adapt, he tried to change, he tried to improvise, but it didn't work. And I think when you go back to his Burnley days, when he played the 2 strikers up front, they were a real handful, 2 banks of 4. That was more like Sean Dyche. But I think David Moyes, it might be something he might look at, that, it's... People will have realistic expectations of what David Moyes can do between now and the end of the season. Yes, they first and foremost avoid relegation, which is a possibility, and they don't want that. The last season it could have soon before they move into the new stadium. So I think he'll have to try something tactically different to get. They're not suddenly going to be creative in midfield, so maybe an additional striker might be the answer.
Chelsea take on Bournemouth this week. It's a tricky game, or maybe not as tricky as it might have been because of the injuries up front that Bournemouth have got now. No Evan Nielsen, he's out for a while, and Enisu now. Well, what a sad situation that is. I mean, he's had a lot of injuries over the course of his career, but this is one that probably is going to mean that we don't see him for a very long time.
It's his second cruciate in a year.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame because I think there's a talented player there. He scored that brilliant free kick, didn't he, against West Ham, and this was his opportunity. I've got to say, whenever I've seen him, I think he's got something. He reminds me of Edinson Cavani. He looks like Cavani. He runs like Cavani. If he can play like Cavani in his peak, then Bournemouth have got a player on their hands. But yeah, nightmare for him, nightmare for the club. They do have players who can play there. I think Dongo Watara's form in recent weeks has been brilliant. He scored a couple of goals at the weekend playing as a false nine, so he might well keep his place. Semenyo can do it as well, although I think you lose something if you push him further forward. And Justin Cliver, I think, started out as a centre forward, didn't he? So they do have options, but I know they are looking into the market. But they're, striker issues aside, they're in a good place at the moment. That was a good win against a decent Championship side at the weekend, coming from behind to score 5. Chelsea, we didn't learn much, did we, from that Morecambe game? Didn't think Nkunku was great, by the way, missed his penalty.
Well, we learned that the referee shouldn't have blown the whistle after 90 minutes because it ruined my bet.
Nicholas Jackson's gone off the boil a bit in the Premier League, so I think they could do with Nkunku firing to put real pressure on him, but he's not. Still think they're too reliant on Cole Palmer, and I don't think you can say with any certainty that Chelsea will win this game because they still concede too many goals. And I think Bournemouth, even without a number 9, are certainly capable of going there and getting themselves on the score sheet.
You never know. It's Chelsea are a bit. Chelsea's problem at the moment is that they had that huge high. They got to the peak where everybody started talking to them as title contenders. And as soon as that talk started, they dropped off a cliff. Confidence went through the floor when they didn't get the goals they were expected to get, when they lost against Fulham, when they were in front in that match. And then since then, they're just trying to scrap to get themselves back on track. There's been a lot of changes to that team as well. 1 or 2 injuries, yes. 1 or 2 players coming back from injury. But I just think, I don't know. It doesn't feel quite right. I don't know what's happened with Madueke behind the scenes, by the way, because he's gone missing and we don't know where he is.
You'd expect him to play at the weekend as well.
Yeah, I don't know what's gone on there, but he's not playing at the moment, which is a big problem because he's a very good player. Look, I also think Nkunku, you mentioned him, is his head out the door. I mean, I'm hearing rumours that maybe they're trying to offload him and he's thinking that he could probably do with a move because it hasn't worked out for him at Chelsea. He's been perennially injured, and when he hasn't been injured, he hasn't really performed. They obviously don't think he's the main man up front. And when he was signed, that's what he was signed to be, by the way. He was signed to be the main striker after scoring so many goals for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga. So I wonder whether or not he's already thinking about a move. And it looked like that at the weekend. They're going to sell Vega, it looks like, because he wants to centre-back. So there's a bit of chopping and changing going on there at Chelsea this January transfer window.
Yeah, and actually I spoke to an agent reasonably well connected at Stamford Bridge, and he said to me it's a little bit of a myth that Maresca has created this really harmonious dressing room. There's still a lot of players who are looking to leave, and you've mentioned some of them there, and I think that was always going to rear its head in January, and maybe that's also a factor in their poor form. Yeah,
and listen, I think, and I know you were sort of, what you're like, you're a little bit of a stirrer, but I was always saying to you, they're not in the title race because it's not sorted yet. This idea that, they've had a good 4 months, so let's all pretend that everything is brilliant at Chelsea again after we've all been calling it a madhouse for the last 2 years. And I said to you, don't get too excited. Don't get too excited because things don't change that quickly. And Chelsea's players aren't as good as some of the others in the league. They're not. I'm sorry. You look at it, they're still young, developing players. If you watch them on a regular basis like I do, you'll see that there is still holes in that team. And they were never, ever going to be in the title race. And now, at the beginning of the season, if they'd said to us all, we're going to try and get into the top 4, brilliant. That's a great achievement. You do that, well done. That's it. That's the limit of your ambition. And it still will be. Terry, thank you very much. What are you doing this week? Got anything interesting? I'm not going to be with you. We've got Spanish of the week.
Yeah, no, big game next week. I watched the Clasico Super Cup final last night, Barcelona.
Barcelona 5-2 winners, yeah.
They were awesome. And maybe, just for this podcast, another reason why Real Madrid need a right back before the transfer window closes because Lucas Vazquez was...
What are you saying?
He was desperate.
What are you saying, Terry? What are you saying?
Well, Premier League clubs that have a right back that might be available...
Carl Walker.
In the summer. Carl Walker, yeah, another possibility. And he's drastic. I mean, they're playing Tchouaméni at the back, centre-half. Lucas Vazquez right back, and they got ripped apart by Barcelona. And Rafinha, the ex-Leeds player, was just... best player in the world at the moment. Everything he's doing is every single game he plays. So be looking up, then Barcelona back down to earth next week with a game away from home against Getafe, which is the last game they would want, to be perfectly honest.
Absolutely. Terry, thank you very much. We'll see you at the weekend. Alex, thank you very much. Enjoy your January transfer window. He's got another 7 podcasts to record this week for talkSPORT, including Inside Devils and that Transfer Notebook podcast. And
I've got 3 games as well.
He will at least 3 times between now and the end of the week tell you that Everton were right to part with Sean Dyche because they're 91st out of 92 in the last calendar year in terms of games won. So there you go. You can play Crook Bingo and see how many times you hear that stat between now and then. Crookstar, thank you very much. And I'll see you Friday because we're on with Troy as well Friday, aren't we, on the White and Jordan show. And we'll have a Premier League All Access podcast out on Thursday previewing the weekend's action. We're looking forward to it.